All right, UPSC aspirants. Let's tackle something you're definitely going to see on those mains exams.
Oh, yeah.
And, hey, maybe even a prelims MCQ or two.
You never know.
India's trade policy.
It really is, it's a bit of a puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
Trade policy impacts everything.
Everything.
From economic growth to jobs, even to India's place on the world stage.
Exactly. And figuring out all those puzzle pieces
It can be tricky.
can be really tricky. It's not as simple as, tariffs and trade deficits.
Yeah.
It's way more than that.
Way more.
It's about
Like
understanding
the picture.
the bigger picture, how India interacts with the whole global economy.
Exactly.
So let's dive into it. We've got some great insights from a recent Indian Express article to help us break it all down.
Sounds good. Even though trade doesn't usually take center stage in the union budget,
It doesn't.
it can actually give us some valuable clues about the government's economic strategy.
That's a great point. It's like we have to read between the lines to figure out what's really driving those policy decisions. What kind of hints should we be looking for in this upcoming budget?
Well, for starters, we know the government is really focused on addressing India's trade deficit
Okay.
and having a stable rupee that's crucial for attracting foreign investment.
Makes sense.
But I think the most important clue we should be looking for
Yeah.
is how the budget plans to boost India's exports.
Okay, that actually reminds me of something that really stood out to me in that Indian Express article.
Okay.
They were talking about how often India changes its customs duties.
Yeah,
And how that can create so much uncertainty for businesses.
absolutely.
I mean, imagine trying to run a marathon when the finish line keeps moving.
Right.
It makes it impossible to plan.
Impossible.
If a company making mobile phones,
Yeah.
they can't predict what the tariffs on imported components like lenses or chargers will be next month.
Exactly.
How can they plan their production and investment?
It's impossible.
And it just makes the whole process unpredictable. And it discourages companies from wanting to even set up shop in India.
It's a major roadblock, and it makes it really tough for our exporters to compete globally.
Yeah.
It's no wonder that India's share of global exports has been kind of stuck,
Yeah.
hovering around 2% despite all the government's efforts.
So it's clear that constantly changing those tariffs isn't the answer.
No, it's not.
The article suggests a different approach,
Okay.
creating a long-term and consistent trade policy.
Consistency. That's key.
I mean, imagine a team dedicated to crafting and fine-tuning India's trade strategy.
Like architects.
Yeah.
Yeah, a dedicated committee that can provide the stability and predictability that businesses need.
They need it.
They need it.
And this leads us to another really important point. India stands on major trade blocs,
Oh, yeah.
like RCEP and CPTPP.
Yes.
I always get those acronyms mixed up.
Yeah, it's easy to do.
Can you remind us what they stand for?
Of course. So RCEP, that's the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It's a free trade agreement among 15 Asia-Pacific nations.
Okay.
And then there's CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah.
That one includes Canada and 10 other Indo-Pacific countries. Now, India has been hesitant to join either of these blocs.
Is that because of a worry of being flooded by cheap imports and hurting domestic industries?
There are definitely concerns, especially with RCEP, which is heavily influenced by China.
Right.
The fear is that joining RCEP could make India's existing trade deficit with China even worse.
Okay, so the question is, which trade bloc, if any, is in India's best interest?
That's the million-dollar question.
The article actually uses simulations to try and answer that question.
Interesting.
What did they find?
So the simulations suggest that joining RCEP might actually worsen India's trade deficit,
Oh, wow.
particularly with China.
Interesting. What about CPTPP?
Well, CPTPP doesn't include China or the U.S.,
Okay.
so it offers a potentially more balanced trade environment for India.
And it sounds like CPTPP might actually align better with India's long-term goals, especially when it comes to boosting exports.
Yeah, it could. And the article also points out that CPTPP includes provisions on labor and environmental protection, which are absent in RCEP.
Hold on, before we move on to that, let's take a moment to remind our listeners.
That simply joining a trade bloc isn't some magic solution for economic growth.
Right.
There's this idea out there that trade deficits are always a bad thing.
Yeah.
But that's not always true.
Sometimes imports can be good, right? Like if we're importing raw materials or components that we need to manufacture things here in India.
Exactly. The Indian Express article highlights that a lot of India's trade deficit comes from importing these intermediate goods,
Okay.
things that are actually used to make products here.
So it's more complicated than just saying, We import more than we export, therefore our economy is in trouble.
Way more nuanced.
We have to look at the details, what's behind those imports and exports.
Exactly. Take India's trade with ASEAN countries, for example. Despite the overall deficit, India actually has a surplus in finished goods trade with them.
Interesting. It's not a simple equation.
Not at all.
This is great information for understanding all the complexities of trade policy,
Right.
which is super important for those UPSC mains exams.
Absolutely.
You can't just memorize textbook definitions.
Yeah.
You need to be able to analyze what's happening in the real world and understand all the nuances.
Couldn't agree more.
Speaking of nuances, let's switch gears a bit and talk about those structural reforms we mentioned earlier.
Okay.
It's one thing to join trade blocs,
Right.
but we also need to make sure that things are running smoothly here at home to support growth.
It's like building a world-class car,
Yeah.
but forgetting to pave the roads.
Oh, yeah, you need that infrastructure in place.
You need the right infrastructure.
What are some specific areas where India needs to improve?
Well, for starters, we need to streamline our regulations.
Okay.
The Indian Express article mentions that businesses often face a ton of bureaucratic hurdles,
Yeah.
which just adds more costs and delays.
It's like trying to run a race with your shoelaces tied together.
Exactly. We need to cut through that red tape and let businesses operate more freely.
I like that analogy.
Simplifying things like starting a business.
Yeah.
Or just the day-to-day operations, that's a good place to start.
Okay.
Then there's the whole issue of labor laws.
Right.
Reforming those laws could make it easier for businesses to hire people, manage their workforce, and ultimately boost productivity.
Makes sense. And of course, we can't forget about infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Efficient transportation, modern ports, reliable power supply.
Yeah.
These are crucial for any economy.
Especially one that wants to be a leader in global trade.
Exactly.
And all of this ties back to attracting foreign investment.
Of course.
When companies see a country with stable policies, good infrastructure, and a skilled workforce, they're much more likely to invest.
It creates this positive feedback loop.
It does.
More investment leads to more jobs.
More growth.
More growth, and then even more improvements in infrastructure and education.
It all works together.
This brings us to another important part of India's trade strategy, integrating into global value chains, or GVCs.
GVCs, right? Those complex networks of production and trade that span the globe.
How can India make sure it's not just participating in these GVCs,
Yeah.
but actually benefiting from them becoming a key player?
That's where a smart and forward-looking trade policy comes in.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some of the key elements of a policy like that?
Well, firstly, it's about figuring out India's unique strengths.
Okay.
What are we really good at? What can we offer that other countries can't?
So identify our strengths and specialize in those areas.
Exactly. And that might mean investing in specific sectors, developing new skills, and creating an environment where innovation can thrive.
So it's not just about making things in India.
Right.
It's about becoming a crucial part of those global value chains.
A partner that companies can rely on.
Exactly.
And it's about thinking strategically, looking beyond just the immediate gains and considering the long-term impact of our policies.
Long game.
The long game. This kind of strategic thinking is crucial not just for policymakers, but also for those of you studying for the UPSC exams.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just about memorizing facts and figures. You
Yeah.
have to be able to analyze them, connect the dots, and see the bigger picture.
And that's what we're trying to do here today.
Yeah.
To give you the tools and knowledge to not only ace your exams,
Yes.
but also to understand how India's economic future is being shaped.
Exactly. And if you're finding this deep dive helpful,
Yeah.
please hit that subscribe button and give us a like.
It really does help us get the word out and keep the conversation going.
We appreciate your support. Now, before we wrap up this part, I
Yeah.
want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay.
What are some specific sectors where India has the potential to become a major player in these global value chains? Think about sectors where we already have a solid foundation,
Yeah.
but also areas that are emerging with a lot of potential for growth.
That's a great question to consider. We'll be back soon with part 3, where we'll continue to explore these fascinating issues and help you understand the complexities of India's trade policy.
Looking forward to it.
And don't forget, all of this is based on a recent article from the Indian Express, which we highly encourage you to check out for a more in-depth analysis. Welcome back to the deep dive. Earlier, we asked you to think about which sectors India could really excel in when it comes to those global value chains.
Right, some real potential for India to become a GVC powerhouse.
Exactly. And remember those tricky UPSC mains questions where you have to analyze and come up with solutions.
Oh, yeah,
Well, this is that kind of thinking in action.
absolutely. It's not enough to just know the facts.
Nope.
You
Yeah.
have to be able to use those facts, connect the dots, and offer some insightful solutions.
So let's put on our analyst hats for a minute
Hmm.
and explore those sectors where India could really become a GVC leader. What do you think?
Well, we already have a really strong base in areas like pharmaceuticals and IT.
Right.
These are sectors where India has already built a global reputation.
For quality, yeah.
The quality and
So
expertise.
we can use those strengths and aim to move up the value chain.
Exactly.
Instead of just exporting generic drugs,
Right.
we can focus on developing more specialized formulations or even become leaders in new drug discovery.
Exactly. And in IT, we can go beyond just providing software services and aim to be leaders in things like AI, data analytics, or cybersecurity.
So building on what we're already good at
Hmm.
and pushing the boundaries of innovation,
Hmm.
what about sectors where we're still catching up but have a ton of potential?
One that comes to mind right away is manufacturing.
Okay.
The government has those initiatives like Make in India
Right.
to boost domestic manufacturing and attract foreign investment.
And there's so much buzz around electric vehicles and renewable energy.
Absolutely.
Could those be areas where India could really stand out in the global market?
I think so. India has huge potential to become a major hub for making electric vehicles and all the components that go with them, as well as developing solar and wind energy technologies.
It fits in perfectly with that global push for sustainability.
Yes.
And it could create so many new jobs and economic opportunities.
Absolutely. And we'd be less reliant on fossil fuels and contribute to a cleaner planet.
And let's not forget about sectors like textiles and agriculture,
Yeah.
where India has such a long and rich history.
Absolutely. Those are areas where we can draw on our heritage and craftsmanship, but also bring in modern technology to improve things like efficiency and quality.
Imagine Indian textiles being used by global fashion brands,
Right.
or sustainably grown Indian produce being sold in supermarkets all over the world.
The possibilities are really exciting, but achieving this vision, it takes more than just trade policy.
Right, it's bigger than that.
It's about investing in education and developing skills,
Yeah.
creating a supportive regulatory environment, and fostering a culture of innovation.
And it also requires a change in mindset from protectionism to strategic integration.
Right. It's about seeing global trade not as a threat,
Yeah.
but as a huge opportunity to leverage our strengths, create jobs, and drive economic growth.
And for those UPSC aspirants listening,
Yes.
this is absolutely crucial. The examiners don't want you to just memorize things.
No.
They want to see that you can understand the nuances of complex issues like trade policy,
Exactly.
analyze different viewpoints, and offer well-thought-out solutions.
And that's exactly what we've tried to do in this deep dive.
We've taken this complicated topic, broken it down, and given you the knowledge and tools to excel not just in your exams, but beyond.
We hope so.
And remember, this entire discussion is based on a fantastic article from the Indian Express. We highly recommend you check it out to learn even more.
Absolutely.
And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button and give us a like if you found this deep dive helpful.
We appreciate your support.
As we wrap up this exploration of India's trade policy,
Yeah.
let's keep in mind that it's constantly changing.
It is.
What worked in the past might not work in the future.
That's true.
So stay curious, keep learning, and keep thinking critically.
Always.
Understanding how trade policy works isn't just about passing an exam. It's about understanding the forces that shape our world.
And equipping ourselves to make a difference.
See you on our next deep dive.
Until then, happy learning.